What is up, Shark Nation? Welcome to another episode of the SharkPod with me, your host, Luke Curry, out of Greystone Studios. We've got Mark Baker out there in Glenageary. How's it going, Mark?
Great, Luke. How are you?
I'm fantastic on Saturday. Actually, I am really tired. My little boy is teething right now. It was a tough one to get up today, but I've broken into a little bit of Easter chocolate this weekend because I thought it was this weekend, so I felt ripped off. So I've broken in there, so I'm back and pumped about this one. I've got our guest today is Rónán Ó Dálaigh out there. Actually, he's based right now in Kerry. How's it going, Rónán?
Good. How are you guys? It's good to be on the show.
Delighted to have you on the show. I know we had a quick intro a couple of weeks ago, just kind of setting this up. Since then, I've been looking into the business Thriftify, which Rónán is the founder, and it's one of those things where when I was in college, so I did a business entrepreneur degree, say 10 years ago. That's when I started, something like that. And there was an element of we did a 1 year kind of module on social enterprise and like enterprise in the community and that type of thing. But it was always something that like it definitely wasn't the focus of the degree. Let's say there was a lot of accounting and stuff like that. But I always thought that it was an interesting thing, and I always thought that there's so much that you could be doing that doesn't have to just be for to go public, to go buy that big house that overlooks my house in Greystones here that we think about quite a lot. So Rónán, maybe if you wouldn't mind giving the guest a little bit of a background on Thriftify and what it is and what it's trying to do.
Yeah, sure. Well, Thriftify is a social enterprise, and I suppose how we view entrepreneurship is probably a little bit different to how people view entrepreneurship. We're probably a little bit cynical about entrepreneurship and about how economics even and the status quo is described. So fundamentally, what we're trying to do is reinvent basically how people shop and why people shop. So at the moment, we live in a really consumer society where people buy things and dispose of them, at will. So about 60% of all new fashion, it ends up in a landfill within a year. All right. So within 12 months, 60% of fashion is going into landfill. And the fashion industry accounts for about 10% of all emissions as well. So we're massively damaging the planet. The pollution, the poor workers' rights, the water usage behind the fashion industry is really, really bad. And then we're getting that stuff and we're not even keeping it. We're just basically throwing it straight into landfill where it's causing a second round of pollution. So at Thriftify, what we've kind of recognized is we need a serious change in that complete industry. And we need to change how and why people engage in buying clothes, and not just clothes, but other things. So what we've identified, first of all, is that charity shops, and not just charity shops, but secondhand and reuse organizations are a major factor in solving the problem. And they receive hundreds of millions of garments. So in Ireland alone, for example, there's about 250 million used clothes going into Irish charity shops each year. So everything and anything that you want already exists, right? And it's going into one of these organizations. So what we're trying to do is use technology to get those items for sale online, because at the moment, the volume is too high for them to be able to list those things online. So they're not even able to value them effectively. And they're selling them in bulk, or they're selling them by the container, or they're just selling them in bricks and mortar stores, which means it's really difficult to search for something particular that you want. So what we've done is we've built a piece of technology to say, let's connect this massive volume of existing used garments and make it available for the general public to buy. And what we can achieve is giving people the genuine option of not just buying something that's used and sustainable, but actually giving their money to an organization that's doing really good work in our communities, instead of an organization that's paying people, half 50 cents an hour. And this was even in the UK. Boohoo was caught out recently for paying people slave wages in the UK. Wow. So they're doing it right under our noses. Imagine what they're doing elsewhere. So what we're trying to do is basically create a model to just disrupt this industry completely.
It's interesting. It kind of reminds me of those stories you hear of when people buy certain discount clothes brands, where they find little notes of cries for help within the thing. Really heartbreaking stuff. And I think this is really interesting business because I don't know about you, Mark, but do you know when you go into like a charity shop and stuff like that, and maybe it is something to do with what Ronan's talking about with the volume, but it does seem it's a bit overwhelming when you go into those stuff. It's just stacks of stuff everywhere. There's no branding. The actual experience of going in to one of those shops is like it's not really designed for customer experience. It's more. It is more for the cause. That's the that's the driving thing here, and maybe it should be like that. But this is an interesting one that because if anyone goes to the website, it feels like a really professional e-retailer, and it's kind of solving for that as well. But like, so when was there were people putting their hand up to get involved in this when you guys were setting it up, or was it a little bit like, how are we going to take pictures of 250 million garments? Or from a logistics point of view, were the shops on board straight away, or how did you guys kind of get them involved?
Yeah, well, we started ages ago. Like, so, I initially had the idea back in like 2014 for this, and it was because I'd picked up a cheap book in a charity shop, and I realized it was worth a lot more than they were selling it for. And that was where the initial idea started, was books. So I sat on the idea for a while, waited until I had a tech co-founder, because I knew it would be a tech play. Was very lucky, got two really good co-founders in. And we just started with one charity. Like we basically just followed the lean startup methodology, line by line, and we're just devout lean startup fanatics. So, it took us a very, very long time. And it was because we were patient and we did things very slowly. And we just worked with one charity. We went to one charity and we said, we think your books are worth a lot more than what you're selling them for. Can we have a couple of hundred? And they said, yeah, have thousands, have as many as you want. And we realized then the volume was just enormous. And the same thing that's happening in clothing is happening in all these other areas: kids' toys, books, DVDs, console games, even paintings and art. Like, everything you can imagine, furniture, like everything has gone into these organizations, and the volume of stuff is so high that they really struggle to value it. So we started out and said, well, we'll help you value the books. And we built a very simple piece of technology to help them value books on an app. And it kind of has just, been iterated and grown from there. And these organizations are run by very, very intelligent people. They're not second-class organizations. They're very, very smart. They're very good at what they do. But they have huge challenges, which even if the best people in the world had that kind of volume, they would struggle to cope with it. So, what they said and what their approach has been for decades is, let's just maximize the volume, and earn as much as we can on the volume, and use that to fund our main work, which is whether that's helping people with sight loss, or whether that's housing people, or whatever it is. They just say, let's maximize the volume, sell it for as much as we can, sell as much of it, and reinvest it. Whereas we've kind of come to them with a different model and said, yeah, that's great, but do that, but don't sell the book that's worth 200 quid for a penny to be recycled. Yeah. Try and siphon that out. Try and find that good stuff. Try and find that stuff that you will shift online. And that's going to be what we believe that can be 20x bigger than their entire operation at the moment. So, they can grow from a £2 billion industry in the UK and Ireland to £20 billion industry, we believe, by coming online. And that's very appealing to smart people. Smart people understand that they're not selling stuff for, if I go to anybody and say, this book's worth 200 quid, do you want to sell it for a cent, or do you want to sell it for 200 quid? They're going to say, well, obviously I want to sell it for 200 quid. So like, they get it, but it's just a challenge. The challenge has been adopting their model and trying to, gradually come on board with something that's a big departure from what they're used to. But, they are very smart, they get it, and they're gradually coming on board. There's still huge work to do, but, I think it's understood now, especially, that if you're not online, and you're a bricks and mortar retailer, you really need to reconsider that.
It's so I just got this feeling of panic when I start to think about the volume of stuff coming in and what to do with it. Like, how do you even store that much? And I remember me and Mark had Des Travers on the podcast. He's the head of DPD, the delivery company, and he was saying, like, if something crashes for like half a day, there's 250,000 packages coming through the system, and they all start to back up. And I remember thinking, like, how stressful that would be. So I guess a lot of their work is probably just managing inventory and how to just warehousing all this the stuff that they might be able to sell one day. So are you guys working on that type of stuff as it comes in, or are they kind of handpicking stuff that they think is going to be have a markup that would work for online? Or do you guys have a list of stuff that's like hot sellers? Or how's that set up?
Yeah, well, we try to approach it from both ends, and we've built the technology in a way that can be used in either approach, right? So you have some organizations that have hundreds of shops and warehouses across the country, and then you have other organizations that have 2 or 3 shops on a very small scale. So what we've done is we've built the solution and the tech in a way that it can be used at the point of source or at the end point, right? So what I mean by that is they can use our technology as soon as a donation arrives. They can point the camera at any barcoded product in the world and it will tell them whether or not they should sell it online. And we've built a bunch of algorithms basically to calculate that for them and to say whether or not you should sell this product. So they can do it as soon as they get it, which a lot of the smaller shops do, and a lot of even some of the bigger chains will do in their stores as the items are coming in. And then that works for the barcoded products. And then what we find a lot of the organizations will do is, because they have huge volume of clothing in warehouses, they'll pick products from the warehouse. And basically, our biggest challenge at the moment is volume. So we've been really focused on getting the technology capable of uploading as much volume as possible. And it's the single biggest challenge that we have, because they have hundreds of millions of garments. Yeah. Like, you can't scan a dress and automate the uploading of that and the pricing because the technology doesn't exist. So what we're finding at the moment is that they're picking stuff that's really good, but there's a lot more to be picked. There's a lot more that could be uploaded. So it's very dependent on having individuals and taking time for them to upload garments. So the only way for them to scale at the moment is to add more people to the process. Now, a lot of them are doing that because they're making a lot of money and they're able to reinvest that in new staff, which they're employing to get involved in the process. But fundamentally, our big focus now in terms of the technology for the next few months is to increase that upload speed. So we're looking at things like Google image recognition technology, text recognition. So they'll just be sending us pictures of the labels, or we'll be pulling all of the information from the labels. We're also looking at some machine learning technology, so that the technology will basically predict and recommend categories instead of them having to type in or tell us what the categories of the products are. So it's a big, huge piece of work for us. And I think that if we can crack that nut, it's going to really enable us to rapidly scale not only the number of volume in terms of pieces for sale, but also the kind of users that we're able to, the kind of locations and international scaling that we'll be able to engage in. Because internationally, you have organizations in Germany and the US who are doing, single organizations doing hundreds of millions of garments. And if we can build a solution that suits them, then we'll be in a really good position to scale.
Rónán, what about, and I don't know if you've thought of this already or if it would work or not, but obviously, say if I have a lump of garments here and I want to get them to a charity shop and then all the work is done there. What if I did the work, I assigned myself to my favorite charity and I had the app or whatever and scanned it, and the incentive is to me, I get a cut, they get a cut, it gets reused. Is that something you thought about?
You might do a good deed as well, Mark. It's all about your cut,
No, but I mean, you have to incentivize people. Money talks at the end of the day. We can wish people will do the best thing, but
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an interesting model, and there's some interesting people doing it. So, like in the UK, there's an organization called Thrift Plus, and they will send you a bag. You put your stuff in the bag, send it back to them, and they split the money 3 ways. So you get a third, they get a third, and your nominated charity gets a third, which is a really interesting model. But I suppose the challenge for us, the reason they do that is because they then control the merchandising. So all of the imagery looks the same, the descriptions are the same, the end customer gets the item in the right time, they get the same tracking number, all of that's handled. So like if we do a consumer play and get hundreds or thousands of people uploading product, everything's going to look different, everything's going to feel different, the experience is going to be different, we won't be able to manage the customer support. There's all those other challenges that come with it. So it's something we're actively exploring, but I think probably the best way to do it is to have a direct connection with the charity retailer. So you send your stuff directly to the charity retailer you want to support, and you get a kickback that way, or you get maybe it's cash, or maybe it's probably more likely maybe it's a percentage off your next shop on Thriftify. So it's kind of a retaining strategy. You know, you post us a dress, and if it sells for 100 quid, you get 50 quid off your next purchase on Thriftify, something along those lines. But again, it's the operational process of how we manage that, and the tech, how we build a tech for that, is the challenge. But it's definitely something I think it's something that's really interesting. Probably something we've spoken about. We haven't planned for it yet, but I think, you know, give us a bit of time and you'll see it there somewhere.
Is there somebody trying to create an Amazon for like a charity, you know, a sustainable Amazon?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of, you know, we would have spoken internally about that a lot. I think there's challenges with that phrase, a sustainable Amazon. Like, Amazon is inherently unsustainable. Like, the whole model of Amazon is rock bottom price, cheap as possible, lowest wages as possible, bust the unions, don't pay tax. So as a model, like, Amazon is the absolute beacon of how not to do entrepreneurship if you want to have a sustainable planet. So, you know, what does a sustainable Amazon looks like? Probably looks like no Amazon, to be honest. You know, how we would be approaching it is a different way of looking at purchasing. So at the moment, when we purchase something, it has a negative impact. For most things we purchase have a negative impact. You know, you might go to your local farmers market and buy organic food. Brilliant. You know, it's local, it's sourced. Excellent. If you're importing a dress from Boohoo, like, it's negative impact, the whole cycle of that, you know, apart from your feel good factor. And that's the reality of the model, the economic model we've built. So what we would more talk about is what's the economic model look like if we want to live in a sustainable planet, if we want people to be on good wages, if we don't want to have a bunch of social problems, if we don't want to have massive pollution, if we don't have rising seas, you know, all those kind of things. So for us, I suppose it's about how can we get the products that are already in existence recycled and reused, which is why I really like the idea we just spoke about, because you're getting people back involved in a loop with the products that they have around them. And genuinely anything you want is in existence, but the problem is it's hard to find it. You know, we can find anything new we want because we've built economic models to get that thing to you next day delivery cheap as possible. But we haven't yet built the models to make things that are already in existence as accessible. So what we're trying to do, I suppose, is give you as good an experience, you know, really quick delivery, a fantastic feel good experience, a good unboxing experience, all of those things that are positive, but without the negative aspect, and have it all as used goods. So charity shops are where we focused and where we started, and there's huge work for us to do in the charity retail sector, years of work really. But it is interesting then to look at, well, what are the other areas that we have massive reuse, or what are the other organizations that are dealing with used goods? And, you know, we will talk internally about how can we get those guys online as well. But for now, I suppose, and for the long term at least, the focus is on charity retail, because that's where the big volume of used goods are.
Okay,
it's interesting. I think, Mark, as well, like, for your idea, that's you're managing a lot of stakeholders there. I think what Rónán was saying there is, like, when you deal directly with the shops, there's a lot more you can control with the bits and pieces. It might be, remember the early days of eBay, where all the pictures are poorly lit, kind of laid out on the carpet, and like it's just not as uniform. And that's what people are kind of expecting now. And you go to like those places like Amazon and stuff like that. But yeah, so in that case, Rónán, when you guys are chatting about building the business and stuff like that, is that always something that's in your mind? That, okay, how can we deliver this so we don't end up with loads of plastic in Dublin Bay, or how difficult is that to do?
Yeah. I think once you commit to it, you kind of find ways to do it. Like, you know, we said when we were sourcing packaging, we said we want the most sustainable packaging in the world. And we were like, well, let's just find the most sustainable packaging in the world. Like, and we found packaging that will go completely back to nature within 90 days if you put it in your home compost. Like I did a test with it. I put it outside with a banana peel on top of it and left it for 3 months, and it just disappeared into the ground. Like,
Wow.
it's made from corn. It's made from corn, and so those kind of solutions exist, right? Now, obviously, it costs. If I was to buy a plastic bag, I'd get it for a fraction of the price. But at what cost? Like, this is the big problem that we have. Every business person and every entrepreneur is thinking about the cost to themselves, and we've been trained. All of us have been trained to do that. We've all been trained to think of what's the cost to me and what's my bottom line, and we completely ignore the cost to the ecosystems, the cost to society, and the cost to other people. So, it's an enormous problem. And, if I was just focusing on our bottom line, I'd be buying really cheap plastic, that would be taking 1,200 years to decompose. And I wouldn't care about that cost. Whereas actually, if you just say to yourself, well, actually, what's the cost of this? Genuinely, what's the cost of the various things we're doing, and how do we get that cost down? Not just the cost to me, but the cost to ecosystems, the cost to the planet, the cost to the people who are supplying these bags, where they're coming from, all of that kind of stuff. If you just build that into your culture, it actually becomes really fun. Like, it becomes a really nice way of doing business. And you kind of realize that you can actually do things very positively. It takes a little bit more effort, takes a little bit more time, and you have to be kind of willing to do that. And that's a real challenge for a startup, social, especially any enterprise, but especially a social enterprise. We have bigger challenges than most enterprises that are for profit, because it's harder to access finance and a bunch of things like that. But I think when you do it, and when you do commit to it, it's really inspiring, and it really gets the team is really bought in. Like, we have a really good culture as well, and I think that's one of the reasons. Like, we're attracting, whenever we have a new position, like, we're attracting hundreds of applications, and it's because people especially young people, are saying, I'm totally fed up with how I've been told the world needs to work. Like, people are genuinely at their last header with how we've been told and trained to view entrepreneurship, and we've a huge demand for positions. We've huge interest in what we're doing, because we're saying things need to be radically different, not just a little bit different. Like, we need to throw this model on its head and come up with something better, and people relate to that. So, obviously then there's the benefits of that. So we spend a little bit more time or effort in doing something sustainable, and that really relates with our customers, our community, and they say, Jesus, yeah, I am actually going to support this company. I am going to get behind them. I'm going to tell my friends and my family. And that's what we found is starting to happen as well. Like, the word of mouth is huge, it's spreading really quickly. And then our retention, some months the traffic on our site can be 60% of it could be retained users, which is just incredible. Like, unheard of for in e-commerce. Like, it's just mental. Like, our retention is just through the roof, and it's because there's loads of reasons, but one of the main reasons is because of our ethics, and because it's relating with people.
It's kind of interesting, and I'm going to pose something here that may not be true, but I'm going to put it out there anyway. But it seems like we mentioned there that we've all kind of been trained to be that kind of economic maximizers, and I think it comes from, it's kind of perpetuated by a fear that we have that one day we won't have enough for food, or we won't have enough for housing, especially in Ireland. Everyone panics a lot around that. So like, okay, like I know when I was in Vietnam a few years ago, when I was swimming around Ha Long Bay, I was swimming through plastic bags, but I have to put that aside, because I gotta save for this mortgage, right? So that's the decision that I'm making, right? But is there something to be said for, like, a little bit of a competitive advantage that you can build in if you do kind of go with the ethical side of things, like you're saying, that type of retention, making people feel good about what they're doing, rather than, like, I buy things on Amazon, and I remember I was on a call recently with the service of a small business that I bought on e-commerce, an appliance, and I was saying to them, like, and it was a really bad experience, and they were being very unhelpful, and I'm like, you're making me go buy something from Amazon. I can't do this. I can't spend all day trying to fix this, and so that type of feeling where it's just like, it's like a capitulation to the Amazon, because there's no really other option for what I wanted in a reasonable time. Had they been building hospitals in a third world country, maybe I would have stayed on the line a little longer. But if their motivation was the same as Amazon's, then I'm kind of like, well,
Yeah. I mean, I think.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go on, Mark. No, well, I was just going to say, I do think there is a huge competitive advantage to be found in doing things the right way. And And it's just unfortunate that the myth has been spread that doing things the right way is more costly. And again, that's kind of, it's almost championed in some quarters. You know, we kind of champion people who are cutthroat, or people who are, or enterprises that are cutthroat. Like Deliveroo, for example, is about to IPO, and you know they're being championed as a great business, whereas most of their staff are on £2 a week, like £2 an hour. Like, so you kind of be thinking, where has this culture come from that we celebrate those? And the reality, guys, is that young people especially are vehemently on a completely different track. And it's something I don't think a lot of, especially perhaps more senior business people, have really come to the realization of yet, that like the radicalization of, not radicalization in a bad way, but like the radically different way young people view entrepreneurship is going to have an enormous impact, I think. And they just view it in the sense, through the lens of climate change and the anxiety that they feel about the fact that what's going to happen to the planet within their lifetime. And if organizations and companies get on board with that, it absolutely makes you stand out from the crowd, like so much. And you know, I think the Amazon thing is really interesting, because when we support Amazon, or when we buy from Amazon, I buy stuff on Amazon, not regularly, but if I need something I can't find elsewhere, like I will buy it on Amazon. You know, I don't think the responsibility for everything lies on the individual shoulders. I think systems do need to change. But what Amazon do is they provide something really conveniently, really cheaply, and really easily. And I don't think, like, if we're saying that we need to change and things need to be less convenient, things need to be more painful and harder to engage with, like, that's not a solution. No one's going to engage with that, you know. So we absolutely do need to be saying, yes, like, our organizations and can be more sustainable, can be better, give you a better feel good factor. But like, reality is they also need to be as convenient. They also need to be as good a consumer experience, because as a consumer, you know, that's a really important part of the journey is the convenience and is the good stuff that Amazon and those kind of companies are able to provide. So like, yeah, I take the point. You definitely have to be doing the good stuff as well as trying to offer a bit of a feel good factor or do things sustainably.
And Ronan,
And is there any other, do you ever look around and just think, geez, that business could be really more sustainable friendly? Is there any other types of businesses that you ever see out there that you're like, if they just did that, you know?
Yeah. That's a scary question, because I might go on a rant now.
Oh God.
But
what's the biggest offenders here? What sticks in the craw?
I mean, look, guys. I mean, I think the biggest one is there's so many companies that have so much resource, and I just can't get my head around how the people who run those organizations, with the power they have, don't do things differently. Like, so oil companies are the biggest one, like, and we have some big fossil fuel companies based in Ireland as well, like DCC and some other ones, and they have absolutely no plans to transition out of fossil fuels. Like, it's just not on their agenda. Like, they're genuinely saying, we're just going to keep burning fossil fuels,
we're all in
for the next 50 years. Yeah, it's like, what the hell? Like, how? Why? Like, you have billions and billions and billions in cash reserves. Like, you genuinely could, if you wanted to, announce, right, it's going to take us time. We know it's going to take you time, but we're going to transition. We're going to start building windmills, and we're going to invest in sustainable energy, or we're going to invest in, like, literally anything else sustainable. So I just can't reconcile how those big organizations don't do that. But you know, I do think that there is a responsibility on business to kind of step up and to genuinely think of sustainable, how they can be more sustainable, and not just kind of as a tick box, but as a genuine thing. Because, like, the reality of the climate crisis, and this is something that keeps me up at night, because kind of almost unfortunately the work I do has led me to read a lot and get really engaged in the climate agenda and the climate movement. So I've actually been taking on a lot of information about it all, and the more you take in, to be honest, the more frightened you get. Because, like, one of the recent things I was reading is the IPCC, and I know we're getting super technical here now, but I'll try and keep it very straightforward. But basically, like, the leading scientists have said, this is the worst case scenario and the best case scenario, and they've been doing that since like the 1990s, of how we think, for example, the seas are going to rise or species loss, right? And every report that's been observed, so they said they did a forecast of how bad things are going to be. Every report that looked at what actually happened in terms of sea level rise, species loss, CO2 emissions has been worse than their worst forecast. So things are progressing at a worse rate than anyone, the leading scientists, ever thought they would, in a whole range of really important areas. Like the seas are rising faster than anyone thought they were going to rise. We're losing species faster than anyone thought we were. Emissions are continuing to rise, to increase faster than anyone thought they were going to increase. So like the trajectory that we're on at the moment is genuinely apocalyptic. And I fundamentally just don't think people know this. I just don't think people have connected with the fact that unless we radically change things, like we're facing apocalyptic levels of climate change where there will be storms so bad in Europe that we won't be able to grow food. Like we won't be able to feed ourselves, lads. And I just find it bizarre then that we have business people talking, well, actually, it might affect our bottom line by 1 or 2%. I'm like, lads, you're not going to have a bottom line. None of us will have bottom lines. Like,
don't worry, Rónán. Rónán, don't worry. Jeff Bezos is going to get us to Mars anyway.
We'll be all good then. But I think there's a simple, not a simple answer, but I think there's maybe a couple of answers why people don't take. And I appreciate your point about the ticking the box feeling, and I think that you can feel that with companies that they're doing this. But I'm like, hey, you guys don't really care about that. It's not the. I'll give you an example of I used to work for Davy stockbrokers back in the day out of college.
Oh,
the belly of the beast, as it were, and. The ground zero of a lot of stuff, but I know they've been really in the news, acting against their clients, all the top guys there. So this is this is all in the papers. But I remember they were losing a lot of staff. I had left a long time at this stage, and they wanted to be more kind of like staff friendly and stuff like that. And they put in a barista bar, and I go, that's not what we're looking for. That's not the. Now go back to work. It was taking the box for employee engagement, or whatever. But it wasn't really. Didn't solve a lot of the stuff there. But
what was the line I read in the paper recently that people used to say? It was me first, Davy second, the client last. Was one of the mottos they had in Germany.
I was at the bottom rung down there, so they didn't they didn't really tell me much. But anyway, my point is, like, when you said, like, why aren't people acting and stuff like that? I think people are so they're in a scarcity mindset so much that they're just like, that sounds terrible, but I just can't worry about that. I have to focus on me. The news is telling me that I'm going to lose my job. The news is telling me this, that, and the other. Or they flat out don't believe it. I think that might be something. They put their head in their sand and they say, or
they're not, they haven't got long left anyway. And it's you mentioned before, the young people are more concerned because it's their direct future. That is a thing, I'm sure. Older people are like,
definitely. Yeah. I think you're right. I think it's multiple things like that. I think though that what we need to be saying now is the people who are in positions of power to do something about it don't get a pass. Like if you're working a 9 to 5, you're a nurse, or you're flat out working, or you're on low wages, or you're in a 9 to 5, like, and you're stressed out with your job. Like, I don't think it's really fair to say, right, you need to solve the climate crisis. Like, it's just not realistic. Like, it's not realistic. Like, I live a vegetarian, travel-free, sustainable lifestyle, and I only purchase clothes from like the most sustainable brands or used. And like, who the hell am I to say to like the vast majority of the population who are working stressful jobs, busy with childcare, busy with all these things, to say, okay, now you also need to take on the climate agenda? Like, it's just not realistic. So I think like that's been part of the problem, is we've said to individuals, you need to solve this. Whereas actually, like, there's a couple of key people who, if they decided overnight to do things differently, 100 companies cause 71% of all emissions. For 100 people, those 100 people said tomorrow, we're going to really do something about this, that would have much bigger impact on fucking 100 million, 200 million people deciding we're going to do something about it. So I think that the point, it needs to be directed a little bit. But the other scary thing that I was reading recently was there was a sociological expert in the US, professor, who was brought in to what he was told was a panel discussion in the US. He told he was going to be giving a keynote speech, but when he arrived, it was like 10 or 15 hedge fund managers and he wrote a book about this, really interesting. And they set him down, and what they wanted to know was they had all bought bunkers. So all of these hedge fund managers had bought bunkers in the US, like underground bunkers, which is apparently a massive industry. And they had stocked them with food and all these things because they were worried about kind of like disaster planning stuff. Like some of them were worried about civil war, but most of them were saying climate change is going to disrupt our society. So I'm preparing. And they wanted to ask them how they would manage their security staff in a world where currency doesn't matter. So they picked his brains for like 2 hours about how they would manage their security staff, basically from a sociological perspective, and how they would get them, keep them loyal and all these things. Jeez. And I find that quite revealing that like some of the wealthiest people in society are actively planning for a disaster day scenario. Like that should kind of be
to.
Yeah, perhaps, yeah. Like that should be a bit of a red flag.
That's so interesting. Sorry, good.
I was just going to say, I know we've definitely taken this conversation down a path that perhaps we weren't planning at the beginning of the podcast.
This is the beauty of podcasts. We can go from thrift store ecom to prepper bunkers and civil war in 35 minutes, which is great. But maybe to reel it into the business again. What's the plan from here? I know that you're based in Ireland, but is this something that can be done internationally? Is this something that you guys have a blueprint to roll out somewhere else, or is it kind of specifically work for the Irish kind of setup with charity shops? Do you know that way?
Yeah. So quite luckily, the problem that the charity shops face in Ireland and internationally is the same. It's very, very similar. So a big volume problem, a big problem with valuation, a big problem with with selling the stuff online. But then at the same time, based on everything we've just been talking about, there's huge demand. So like the word is spreading, and more people are becoming aware that fast fashion is a really bad thing. Like it's 70% of the fashion we buy is polyester, right? So which is oil. So it's kind of like walking around in a top that says Shell written on the back, because they're like, you're kind of sponsored by the oil industry. The vast majority of fast fashion is, you might as well put sponsored by Shell or sponsored by BP on the back of your top, because that's what it's made from. So people are starting to realize that, and they're moving away from it. So the demand is huge, and that's grown. That's the same thing internationally as well. So we've launched in the UK, and we're kind of really active there. Like we're signing up 3 or 4 charity shops a week. Like it's way busier than we thought it was going to be, which is really humbling, because you kind of realize the approach we've taken of just being really laser focused on iteration, the problem, trying to provide value, has kind of, for a lot of people it's resonating, and that's great, to be in that position now for the first time, whereas for years you're kind of questioning, should we do this, is this worth it, is this a waste of time? To be in a position now where you're saying, actually guys, well done, like we've actually built something that people are interested in, is really nice place to be in. So we started scaling in the UK, and that's the big focus now for this year, is to really focus on the UK. But then we're also talking to quite a large network in Germany as well, like one of the biggest reuse networks there, again all not for profit. Another organization, a reuse organization in Austria, and then we have we're kind of in advanced discussions then with an organization in Canada as well, a very big reuse organization, not for profit in Canada, and one early stage in the US. The UK stuff is a real challenge with Brexit, and it's presented loads of challenges. Like it's kind of, I just can't get my head around how we went ahead with Brexit. Like it doesn't make any sense. Being at the coalface of it and seeing all these challenges, you're like, what, you mean we have to do all this work that we wouldn't have had to do otherwise? So that's been a challenge. But then, it's the European stuff is really interesting, because we don't have to change anything. We can do it all from Dublin, which is great. Nice. We just have to have localization of the language. And then the US stuff is, to be honest, is a little bit more, that needs a little bit more thought.
Oh, we lost you, Rónán.
I think your audio's gone there for a second.
Sorry guys, I might have dropped off there. I got a phone call.
Yeah, you're back.
You were talking about the US?
Yeah. So it's kind of hard. The US needs more consideration, is what I was saying. That it's a much bigger and a much scarier market, and who's going to be there, who's going to do the work, and how are we going to handle it. So that's kind of
in Ireland. Is there many like government incentives for companies like yourselves to be sustainable friendly?
I mean, we've taken huge government support, so I don't want to be too critical. But there isn't a sustainability fund, for example, or there isn't, which I think there should be. I think there should be a green fund, which basically enables companies to invest in greening their enterprise, whether it's through energy or through new supply chains or stuff. That doesn't exist yet. But the other challenge, I suppose, of it is in the economic model. So when we started out, we tried to set Thriftify up as a charity. We felt that if we do it as a charity, it will get the most traction because we're going to charity saying we're also a charity. But we spent 3 years trying to raise the finance as a charity, and we just couldn't do it. We just weren't able to do it. We weren't eligible for Enterprise Ireland money. We weren't eligible for Leo money. We had to kind of rely on grant money. And, when you consider that Enterprise Ireland invests like 200 million quid a year in companies in Ireland, if you're not eligible for Enterprise Ireland in Ireland, you're going to struggle. So we had to get eligible basically for Enterprise Ireland. And what we did was we actually did a lot of work with Arthur Cox to try and develop a company model that would maintain our social impact ethos, but also make us eligible for all of these other finance routes. So that was a kind of a challenge. And again, it was kind of 6 months of wasted time, to be honest, that we had to go and do something that typical enterprises wouldn't have to go and do. So there isn't really kind of a level playing field in Ireland, or I would argue in lots of places, but especially in Ireland, it's not the same. It's like for-profit enterprises are kind of playing on a level pitch, and we're running uphill, really.
It's interesting. And so, just for people that are listening that might have they're starting their business and stuff like that, dealing with Enterprise Ireland, is there kind of like they have like set levels? Okay, if you get this amount of customers, we'll fund you this way, or if you can find X amount, will match that. What's their model? I don't really understand it.
Yeah, so it kind of works. There's a couple of different tracks and ways in. So they have lots of different funding streams. And for example, you can apply for an employment match. Like they'll have various employment match schemes where they'll help you increase your employment, for example, and they'll give you a grant for that. But then they have the equity route, which starts out as the competitive start fund, and you can get 50,000 euros from them for 10% in the company. And then if you grow and if you're successful, what you're able to do is apply for what's called the HPSU, the High Potential Startup. And then there's 2 tracks on HPSU. So there's the initial, I can't remember the names, to be honest, sorry. But there's one track which is kind of for the early stage startups. So when you get CSF funding, you're on that early track and you have a development advisor and they're trying to help you on your journey. And you can apply for other kind of grants and stuff like mentorship grants or finance grants, kind of small scale stuff, but again, very helpful to a startup. And then when you get on to the bigger, that's the second track, basically where you can basically say, we feel like we're really raising money here, or we feel like we're really growing. Then what you can do is you go to them and you make an application for HPSU matched finance. And the way that works is for every euro that you get from a private investor, they'll give you €1 up to a maximum of 250,000. Nice. So we got some really good advice initially, which was, look, you're going to have to do a huge amount of work with Enterprise Ireland, and you're going to have to do an application, and you're going to have to prove the case to them, etc., etc. And when you do that, you're then going to have to go and you're going to have to get private investors, because they won't give you the money unless you have matched funding. So the advice that we got, which was really good, was go and find the private money first and then go to Enterprise Ireland. Because you can say to them, now we kind of did both at the same time, because we wanted to be able to say to the private investors that if you give us the money, Enterprise Ireland are going to match it, because they know, the private investors also know that you need more money to scale, yeah. And they, we went out and we said, well, look, we need 250,000, and they said, rightly said, that's not going to be enough to scale. And we were like, yeah, we know, that's why Enterprise Ireland are going to give us another 250,000. And we had it in a soft kind of understanding, nothing in writing, but we were very confident, and we knew that, yeah, Enterprise Ireland are going to come on board, because we were growing so quickly, and because basically the traction we were getting was really good, and we met all the criteria. So we found a private investment first, went back to Enterprise Ireland and said, okay, guys, look, we have some really experienced, good investors here who are not only are coming on board with finance, but really get the ethics and the ethos of the company. And now we want to do an application. And that just makes it much more compelling. You know, if you're going to anybody and saying, well, actually, these really good people over here want to give us money, will you do it as well? It's just much more compelling than going and saying, well, you have nothing, will you give us something?
Yeah.
They've been really good. Like I would recommend them, you know. It's been relatively straightforward. It does take time, a little bit more time perhaps than getting money from a VC, but you know, you have all these other supports there, and you know, we've gotten good support in the UK side of things, and a range of other areas, and it opens up other grants and other opportunities. So
Cool.
it's been good.
Awesome. Okay, this time we're coming up on our 3/4 of an hour. Believe it or not, we've been on a crazy journey so far. But Mark Baker likes to finish things off with a lightning round for our sharks here on the SharkPod.
All right.
So they don't have to be lightning quick answers, but it's kind of we'll see what happens. What do you think, Mark? What's the first question there?
Yeah, I might mix them up slightly just based on the industry and stuff. So I'd usually ask what apps you use the most, but is there any apps that would help people have a more kind of sustainability friendly life?
Oh, good question. I've started using Evocco recently, EVOCCO, and basically you take a picture of your receipt, your shopping receipt, and it's really cool. Like I love the tech behind it. I actually had a call with the founder because I was like, how does this tech work? Give me
Are
that
they Irish or?
Yeah, Irish, yeah. And basically the tech will read your receipt and tell you the impact of your food shopping. And then it's like gamified. So you do it each time you go shopping, and you're kind of getting more and more impactful. And you're like, no, wait, I won't buy the avocados this time. I'll buy oranges, or like I'll buy Irish strawberries or something instead of Portuguese or something. You know, so it's kind of fun as well.
And what's that called again? Sorry.
Evocco.
Very good.
Yeah, that's cool.
Good stuff. What's your favorite social media and why?
Instagram. I'm a fiend for Instagram. I just find it's great for traction, and there's no bullshit. Like people are a lot more straightforward and honest on Instagram. You can tell a proper story on Instagram. You can actually engage with people. We do all of our socials, like not all, but like 90% of our work on social is directed on Instagram. I have stayed off TikTok because it's like crack cocaine, and if I go on TikTok for like 2 minutes, I'll find myself 3 hours later watching puppy videos. Like, so that's
I had a look on that as well. When you press back, it just gives you more stuff that you want to look. You're trying to get out of it. And I was like, no, I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. It's obviously good. It's good for business. People do well out of it. But it's definitely, it's addictive. If you weren't doing what you're doing now, what else do you think you'd be doing? This sounds like this is a real passion project. I'm actually quite envious of what you're doing, you know, and how passionate you are about it. But if you weren't doing this, what else would you be doing?
Good question. Probably be in activism. Probably be trying to fight some other good cause. Or I'm a big fan of renewable energy as well. I love the idea of democratizing energy. I think we should have, like in Denmark, they have cooperative energy co-ops across the whole country. Like 90% of their energy is produced by companies that are all democratically owned by communities, which I just think is savage. So that's something that's kind of like something I look forward to maybe in the future. But other than that, I would probably, to be honest, I'd probably just take a lot of time off and just read books and garden.
Nice. Very good. How much money is enough money?
Oh, good question. I think if I can eat well, I'm a big foodie. I think if I can eat well, see me friends, just enjoy life without having to worry about without being stressed. I think that's enough. Like the vision for me has always been really, you know, if this works, 100% of anything I take will go back into the next cause, and that's how we've set it up. So yeah, for me, it's not really about the money. It's kind of about the having the crack, and enough money to have the crack.
That's a great answer.
Yeah. Put that on my tombstone.
Just enough. Just spent the last few quid on the tombstone. That's it. Then it's
okay. Is it who you know or what you know?
Oh, who you know. Yeah, who you know. And the reason I think it's who you know is because I've just seen how much easier it is to get stuff done if you know people, in the right people. And it's a bit of a barrier as well, I think, to a lot of entrepreneurship, successful enterprises are based on who you know. And that who you know circle is a circle, and it's not a circle that everybody has access to. It's not a circle that I had access to coming from Bonog and Clondalkin. It's not a circle that people in disadvantaged communities or marginalized communities or minorities have access to. So I think it's kind of an interesting one to think of, like from a sociological perspective. Our enterprises represent that circle. Like our companies don't represent society. Do you know what I mean? Because they don't have access to that circle in the same way that other people do. So I think that's a really interesting one. Obviously, you need to know what you're doing and you need to research, and that's kind of taken for granted. But if you want to be scaling and growing, it's absolutely you know.
I think another question that people need to ask themselves is, how do you get to know the people? How do you get in the door? You know, that's the struggle. There's different ways of doing it.
Yeah. I mean, I think you kind of have to be. I think you just have to be really genuine. You know, you kind of have to lay. I would have started. I set up my first company straight out of college, and I would have started with the kind of glamorized, glossy approach and trying to present an image of myself. And it doesn't, like, it's just very stressful to do that, you know, or to try and figure out what other people are looking for. It's just really stressful. So I think the sooner I kind of learn to say, you know what, like, I don't have time for that anyway. And I'm just gonna, if people resonate and want to have a conversation, great. And if they don't, just move on to the next person. Like, there's enough people out there will want to talk to you for who you are. So I think that was one of the things that has worked for us, is just, we're just really genuine and honest, you know, and people relate to that. And I think there's qualified networking is really good. So, you know, I have stopped doing, like, go to a random networking event for the sake of doing networking, whereas, like, I'd be invited to a group and I'll look at the list and say, oh yeah, actually these people look like they're really in my space, or something that I can get something out of. And there's loads of groups like that. So I think if you can pick out those networks and say, actually, I'm going to do qualified networking, and I'm going to do networking in spaces and in groups that I have a much higher likelihood of me getting something out of, as opposed to, like, 9 o'clock or 7 a.m. breakfast with a load of accountants or something. Not to hate on accountants, Mark, but, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. Like, even our introduction was, like, talking about being genuine, was from Rob Cullen in the Chamber. Do you know, like, and he obviously got on well with the both of us, and there he knew we'd get on well, and there's how we've networked, you know, one step.
Yeah.
So shout out to Rob.
Yeah, big Rob.
Thanks, Rob.
Okay. Two more, right? If you could advise somebody to learn one skill, what would it be? And this is it's kind of an entrepreneur type question, so keep that in mind.
Microsoft Excel.
Nice. Be a wizard at that.
You're hating on accountants, and now you're on talking about Excel.
I know. Like, Excel is so important, especially in anything to do with data or anything to do with e-com. Like, if you're flying on Excel, you just can do a lot more. I wish I had just spent more time doing it in college. It's kind of something I had to learn more of coming out of college. So yeah, that's the first one that comes to mind. But then the second one probably the bigger one has been, like, well-being. So if you can develop the skill of looking after yourself, which I think is a skill, you know, really minding yourself and making sure that you're well, I think is actually so important, you know. And it's not something I've done in later years, is to say, do you know what, if I'm not enjoying this, there's no point, and I'm going to take a day off to chill out and get my head right again. And, you know, I think that's a skill, and I think it's probably the most important skill.
I think to be able to give to others, you have to get your own house right as well. And I've noticed that myself. When I'm doing well, I definitely give more to others, whether that's just even talking to people or actually donating, you know. So if you want to give more, you gotta look after yourself first. Last one. What book would you recommend to maybe the 18-year-old Rónán?
Oh, good question. And it has to be a book that was written when I was 18. So it can't be like Greta Thunberg's book, which it probably would be. I think God, it's such a good question, because I'm thinking of, like, the autobiographies I read, which I read a lot of, like, so Gandhi's autobiography or Martin Luther King's biography had a huge impact on me. And I think if I had read them earlier, maybe that would have been good. But then at the same time, like, I think I would have put a lot of pressure on myself to read, like, books that are going to make me smarter, or books that I can add to my belt, you know, tick a box, and now I'm smarter because I've read this really dense book. Whereas actually, like, now I'm just reading cheap fiction because I'm like, I need to switch off. So I'll pick up, like, the cheapest, trashiest horror fiction,
Romance
or crime
novel.
fiction. No, the
Down in
romance I
Kerry in the
tried. I was like,
hills
bit too much. But I think if I could go back to 18-year-old Ronan, I would have said just enjoy reading for the sake of reading, because it's actually such a great way to switch off and just to relax.
Very good.
Nice.
That's it.
That's it. So, Ronan, I'd like to wish you all the best with the business. Sounds like you're going to be conquering the German-speaking world next on the agenda. But it seems like something that can be kind of rolled out in all different countries, and something that have a big impact and help those charities in the end of the day. So, thanks very much for coming on the Shark Pod, and we will talk soon.
Thanks a mil, Ron.
Thanks a mil, guys.
Slán.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
It's been great to chat. Cheers.